How many people would be here and what extraordinary energy was here. And
I think one factor, today Sunday,
even
so no work.
but
I think they sacrifice sleep. Okay.
we try to make these later in the day, but it costs more later in the day, so we have to do them in the morning.
That's right.
You know, whenever I see a group like this, I'm always, there's a poem by a Japanese poet, Kobayashi Isa, a very simple poem, that under cherry trees there are no strangers. And I always have that feeling around His Holiness, is that he is our great cherry tree, and that sometimes 500,000 people, strangers, in normal life come to see His Holiness. But under the cherry tree of His Holiness, we all become friends very quickly. He has that unique ability to find that common denominator of life force, joy, love that animates us. And I've never failed to see that happen anywhere in the world, whether it's been in India, of course, where literally 500,000 people will show up in Bodh or Siliguri or Ladakh or wherever. And immediately we're all in a very small, close family friendship. Or if it's in America or Europe, South America, and Mexico, I've seen incredible things there with His Holiness. I'm here today as the chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet. So I think the talk we'll have this morning, which will be about 25 minutes, will focus on the situation and has it's evolved since the 50s and the present. And I'd love to have His Holiness share with us his view of how the situation has evolved, how it's changed, and eventually the situation as it is now in China and also in Tibet, and how it relates to that dynamic as well as the international dynamic. I think if we have time, I'd like to get into also His Holiness's feelings about this rather crude form of nationalism which we're seeing evolve around the world now. It's very unpleasant and crude nationalism, tribalism. So we'll see how far we get in this talk. We have about 25 minutes. So, Your Holiness, just to start with the evolution of the International Campaign for Tibet, this, to the best of my knowledge, it came from three people originally. It was Lodi Gere Rinpoche, and Van Walt was in that first group too, and Michel Bohana came to you with an idea, probably in around 1988. And from my own side, we had just started, Bob Thurman and I had just started Tibet House, and I was becoming much more politicized at that time. But do you remember what your vision was, or your hopes and dreams for ICT and the international political movement to help the Tibetan people?
Of course, very important, because I think as far as 6 million Tibetan people's determination is concerned, very strong. But we need support from outside world. So therefore, this organization, I think right from the beginning, very, very active. First day, I think, I feel it is very important. Tibetan struggle, not just political. I think now more and more people, including many scientists, realize the knowledge which we kept over 1,000 years, originally come from India. This knowledge, sometimes I describing those knowledge which originally come from India, mainly in Nalanda tradition, over 1,000 years, we kept. Now today, these traditions available only in Tibetan tradition. So that, besides sort of Buddhist practice or Buddhist thing, but psychology and philosophy like quantum physics and then logical approach. These things I consider, I think, the treasure of world, I think. So therefore, Tibetan issue very much related with that. If Tibetan issue is just political, then I will not, already now, I think some of them may know, 2001, I retired from political responsibility. All political matter was carried by elected political leadership. So I retired. But as far as the responsibility for preservation of Tibetan Buddhist culture, this ancient Nalanda tradition, I really feel something really worthwhile to preserve. And there is real potential to share more human beings. So I think my very concept, the sense of responsibility or global responsibility, is actually come from, you see, the Buddhist tradition. We always say entire sentient being as a mother sentient being. So this organization, so ICT, very, very helpful. You see, make clear about Tibetan issue. So it is very, very useful. Thank you, and including you yourself. Right from the beginning, you really, I think, fully involved by yourself. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I remember being in Bodh Gaya in '86, I think it was. His Holiness, I met him in Dharamsala in 1982, and I had been a student of Zen at that time, Japanese Buddhism, and it completely captured me, and I had a daily Buddhist practice, which was a wonderful thing to establish. But when I met His Holiness and the Tibetan community in Dharamsala, my life radically changed, obviously. And I saw the fullness of the possibilities of taking the teachings of the Buddha very seriously in the 360 degrees of what his teaching was, and that the ability to completely transform one's mind and one's life we were capable of that kind of incredible and complete transformation. So it certainly set me on a path. But when we met, I remember very clearly in 1986, and I was on my way leaving Bodh Gaya, and I was brought to your rooms, and you said to me at that point, you know, we need a lot of help, us Tibetans, and we need to rely on our friendships in the rest of the world. And I think it was in those years where you realized that the Tibetan dilemma, the paradigm, had to be internationalized to really help the people inside of Tibet. That it couldn't be kept as a small dialogue within Asia, that it had to be internationalized. And that really was the root of the impulse to create International Campaign for Tibet, which Sirin Jampa has just said, we have offices all over the world now, and I think are doing extraordinary work. Your Holiness, could you talk to us? There's so little that we know about what's going on inside of Tibet and the lives of Tibetans inside of Tibet and how that has evolved. When you left in 1959, obviously there was chaos. no one knew exactly what was going to happen at that point. And could you describe a little bit about your thinking as you left Tibet in 1959 and went into exile in India? What you saw as the future of Tibetans in exile, but also the ones who had to remain inside of Tibet?
Last 60 years, the situation sometimes very serious, and including torture, killing, very, very serious. But sometimes a little bit comparatively more lenient. For example, during Cultural Revolution, or just before Cultural Revolution, around 56, the open revolt started from eastern Tibet. Come, some. Then that also the crisis spread on the area, northeast Tibet, 1958. So a lot of people killed. Many people, arrested. So I think early 80, my was a direct contract with the Chinese government. As a result, we have the opportunity to send some fact-finding mission. So after they returned, they told me some of their own village, the male
population.
Male population of much reduced because of killing, fighting. So, very sad, but then after Cultural Revolution, particularly when Hu Yanpan became party secretary, then things really much change. So then after Hu Yanpan, in China proper, eventually Tiananmen event happened. So then their policy become more hardliner. So in Tibet area also, then some of these hardliner, they are very short-sighted, narrow-minded. So they, in their eye, separate Tibetan identity, including language and religious Buddhist knowledge, they consider source of threat of separation. So accordingly, they really carry systematic policy. In many areas, they restriction, study Tibetan. And then these bigger monasteries, they start political education. So very difficult. But then, more suppressive policy, Tibetan become more harder, including younger generation. So then, during Jiang Zemin president, then we developed some direct contact. Comparatively, things a little better. So like that, sometimes, because of much difficult, sometimes a little bit better. But economy is concerned. Now, in many Tibetan areas, new buildings, new house, and I think economy, facility, I think improve. That also good. Now my main concern is the environment issue. one my Chinese friend, ecologist, she